Right, so get this. We're diving deep today into how healthcare is changing, like right in front of us. I mean, we've all had those virtual appointments and online health stuff, but where is all of this really headed? That's what we're going to unpack.
The really interesting thing is it's not just like trading the waiting room for your living room, you
Hmm.
know? Researchers are calling this the metaverse, and it's like reshaping how we think about health and care and even what it means to be a patient or a doctor.
The metaverse.
Yeah.
When I first saw that term in this Advances in Health Sciences Education journal, I have to admit, I was like, huh. But the more I read the research, it just clicked. This isn't just a new name for a virtual clinic. It's a huge shift, like we're stepping into a whole new dimension of healthcare.
It is a pretty powerful metaphor, and the research shows some pretty surprising first reactions to this whole thing. You'd think people would push back, but the studies show tons of positive feedback from patients and clinicians and even hospital administrators.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. Everyone seemed to be on board, at least at first. But their reasons were pretty different. For patients, it seems like convenience was a big deal. The research shows how much people love not having to travel or miss work or sit in those packed waiting rooms. One patient even said they were so relieved to not have to block off half a day for a quick appointment.
That's a really important point because it shows how patient expectations might be changing. The metaverse is making healthcare easier to get and honestly more consumer friendly. This could be good, empowering patients to be more involved in their own health, but it also makes you wonder if we're turning care into just another product.
That's a good point. Do you think maybe this focus on convenience could end up being more important than other parts of being a patient, like building a good relationship with your doctor?
That's a really valid concern, and the research shows that doctors are dealing with this exact tension. They see the good things about virtual care, the easier scheduling and all, but a lot of them are noticing a change in how they interact with patients.
Right, the study talks about two main ways people see the metaverse. And it seems like at first most people saw these virtual technologies as just tools for healthcare service, basically doing the same things but online.
Exactly. But what the research shows is the metaverse is not just a copy of a real clinic online. And that brings us to the second way people see it as tools for managing healthcare. This is about how we can use these technologies to streamline processes, make things more efficient, and basically manage healthcare in a whole new way.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these different viewpoints could cause some friction, especially between doctors and patients.
Yeah, you got it. One story that really stood out to me was about a clinician who had a virtual appointment with a parent who was driving during the call. Can you believe that? It just shows how lines are getting blurred and there are new safety risks in the metaverse.
Wow, that's kind of scary. Makes you wonder if patients are doing other things during appointments. Are they really getting everything they need from the doctor?
It's a valid question, and it goes back to the bigger issue of attention and being present in the metaverse. Clinicians are saying that patients aren't as focused, they get distracted more easily, and even seem less respectful of the doctor's time.
So it's not just the physical space that's different, it's the whole way we interact.
Exactly. The traditional power dynamic between doctor and patient is changing in the metaverse. There's this feeling that doctors have less authority, and some even feel like glorified telemarketers instead of respected medical professionals.
That's a far cry from the image of a doctor in a white coat. I'd see why that would be frustrating for doctors who are just trying to do their best for patients in this new world.
And it's not just about being frustrated, it's about their identity as professionals. The metaverse is making doctors rethink what it means to be a doctor in this digital age.
It's almost like we're all still figuring out the rules of this new medical world, trying to find our way while still keeping that connection between doctor and patient.
It really is like exploring some uncharted territory. And just like with any new frontier, there's so much potential, but there are also risks. The trick is to approach it with a sense of wonder, but also with a healthy dose of caution.
Speaking of caution, I think it's time we talk about one of the more concerning things that came up in this research, the possible effects the metaverse could have on doctors' thinking, cognitive impacts and all that.
Definitely. This is something we need to pay attention to. Several doctors in the study said they felt mentally overloaded, like they were struggling to focus, and some even had memory lapses about their virtual appointments.
That's pretty worrying. Do you think these cognitive challenges are just part of the metaverse, or is it more like part of a bigger trend of digital fatigue that we're all dealing with these days?
That's a good question. It's probably a bit of both. We're constantly bombarded with digital stuff these days, and the metaverse is just adding another layer. Doctors are spending hours on screens, juggling all these virtual appointments, and trying to keep up with the constant flow of digital information. It's no surprise their brains are feeling the strain.
One story that really stuck with me was about a doctor who couldn't remember a patient having a really emotional breakdown during an appointment. The patient remembered it clearly, but the doctor had completely blanked on it. That's a little scary.
Yeah, it really shows what can happen when our brains get overloaded. It makes you think about what could happen to patient care if doctors are having trouble remembering important details or missing emotional cues during those virtual appointments.
It makes you realize how important it is for doctors to take breaks, set boundaries, and find ways to handle all the mental demands of the metaverse.
Mm.
We can't expect them to be at their best if they're constantly on the verge of burnout.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual doctors taking care of themselves. We need to change the system to support them in this new environment. Things like rethinking how we schedule appointments, adding mindfulness training to medical school, and creating a culture that values mental health as much as physical health.
It's interesting because some doctors in the study actually said the metaverse let them pick up on different things about their patients. They talked about seeing patients in their homes and noticing things they might have missed in an exam room.
That's a good point. The metaverse does give us new ways to observe and understand our patients. But it's not a simple trade-off. Just because you can see someone's living room doesn't mean you instantly get a deeper understanding of their life or their health. It takes a different set of skills to interpret those cues and to handle the complexities of virtual communication.
So it's not just about adapting to new technology.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental shift in how we think about and do healthcare.
Absolutely. The metaverse needs new ways of thinking, new frameworks, and new approaches to medical education and practice. We can't just try to make the old models of care fit in a digital space. We need to rethink the very foundation of healthcare in this new virtual world.
Feels like we're at a crossroads. We can either try to force the old ways into this new world, or we can take this chance to completely reimagine healthcare.
And that brings us to an important question for you, the listener. As we go deeper into this metaverse, what kind of healthcare future do you see?
Yeah, what kind of system do we want to create in this new digital landscape? One that's all about efficiency and convenience, or one that values human connection, empathy, and that holistic approach that's so important to healing and well-being?
It's a question we all need to think about carefully, and it's a conversation that needs to include everyone, patients, doctors, policymakers, and the people creating the technology.
We can't just let the technology dictate how this all unfolds. We need to be actively involved in shaping the metaverse, making sure it benefits both patients and doctors.
And this is where the research gets really interesting. Because while the metaverse has its challenges, it also opens up some exciting possibilities. For example, some doctors said they felt a stronger sense of empathy, like they were more connected to their patients by seeing them in their own homes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's not all bad news. There's potential for a deeper connection, too.
Exactly. The key is to understand how this new space works, to develop the skills and strategies to navigate it, and to be aware of the potential downsides, while also embracing the chances to grow and innovate.
It sounds like we need a whole new playbook for healthcare in the age of the metaverse.
We do.
Yeah.
And everyone needs to be involved in writing that playbook, patients, clinicians, policymakers, and everyone else who's part of this evolving healthcare system.
So as we continue our deep dive, let's shift our focus to what all of this means for you, the listener, as you find your way through this new world. Whether you're a patient or a doctor, the metaverse is already shaping your experiences.
We'll talk about practical tips for thriving in this virtual world, discuss the ethical things we need to consider in digital healthcare, and look at the skills you need to make the most of this big shift.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. If you're listening to this, you've probably already had a virtual appointment, or you will soon. So what can you do on either side of the screen to make it a good experience in the metaverse?
Well, if you're a patient, the first thing is to remember, this is different from seeing your doctor in person. You wouldn't walk into their office with the TV blaring, right? So you got to set up your space at home for a good virtual visit.
Right. Find a quiet spot, turn off distractions, make sure your internet's working. It's about being prepared just like you would for an in-person appointment.
Exactly. And on that note, don't be shy about speaking up. If you
Yeah.
can't hear well, or the connection is bad, or if you feel like things are rushed, say something. Just like in a regular appointment, you have the right to communicate clearly and get good care.
It's also about thinking about how you present yourself, right?
Ah.
I know I've taken virtual meetings in my pajamas, but maybe that's not the best for a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, that's a good point. We're all still figuring out the do's and don'ts of the metaverse, but I think it's safe to say you should dress and act like you would for an in-person visit. It shows respect for the doctor's time and their expertise.
And maybe even write down a few things you want to talk about or questions you have, especially with those memory lapses we talked about earlier. It wouldn't hurt to have a little reminder list.
That's great advice for anyone, really, no matter what kind of appointment you have. Being prepared is key to good communication in healthcare.
Now, for the doctors listening, what are some things from this research that can help them navigate the metaverse better?
Well, first of all, it's important to realize that this new environment needs different skills. You can't just assume that what works in person will work perfectly online.
So what kind of skills are we talking about?
For one, you need to be really good at communicating virtually. That means being able to show empathy and build rapport through a screen, picking up on subtle nonverbal cues, and guiding the conversation so patients stay engaged.
It's almost like learning a whole new language.
You could say that. And it's not just about the words you say, it's about your tone of voice, your facial expressions, your body language. It all adds up to the message you're sending.
I'm also thinking back to those concerns about cognitive overload and burnout. What can doctors do to protect themselves in this demanding digital world?
Self-care is super important these days. Taking breaks between appointments, setting boundaries between work and personal life, and practicing mindfulness can all help reduce stress and prevent burnout.
It sounds like the key is to be proactive, both in learning new skills and in making your own well-being a priority.
Absolutely. The metaverse is here to stay, and it's up to all of us to figure out how to thrive in this new world.
And it's not just up to individual patients and doctors to figure this out, right? We need a big shift in how we think about and approach healthcare in this digital age.
I couldn't agree more. We need more research to understand the long-term effects of the metaverse. We need to change medical education to give future doctors the skills they need. And we need to develop ethical guidelines to make sure virtual care is fair, accessible, and truly focused on the patient.
This deep dive has given me a lot to think about. It's exciting to see how technology is changing healthcare. But we have to be careful about these changes and make sure we're protecting that human connection that's at the heart of healing.
I agree. The metaverse has amazing potential, but it also comes with unique challenges. By being aware of these challenges, by talking openly about them, and by working together to shape this new frontier, we can create a future for healthcare that's both innovative and human.
So as we wrap up our exploration of the metaverse, we'll leave you with this one last thought.
Pay attention to your own experiences in this new world. What's working well? What needs to be improved? Your thoughts matter. Share them with your doctors, researchers, policymakers.
Because in the end, the future of healthcare isn't something that's just happening to us. It's something we're all creating together.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the metaverse.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.